The ornaments glittered, mocking my empty heart. The scent of pine and cinnamon, usually a comfort, now felt like a cruel reminder of everything I lacked. Laughter echoed from the living room, each joyous burst a tiny shard of glass twisting in my gut. They thought they had broken me, reduced me to a silent observer in my own family's celebration. They had no idea I was meticulously cataloging every insult, every condescending glance, every word that would fuel the fire of my coming storm. If you cherish the unwavering support of your family, even when they stumble, subscribe now and become part of our ever-growing family. Christmas had always been Mom's stage, a meticulously crafted performance of familial bliss where everyone played their assigned role. My sister, Sarah, the golden child, basking in the glow of her recent home purchase, a symbol of her success. My brother, Tom, the dutiful son, always ready with a witty remark and a helping hand. And then there was me, Lucy, the perpetual disappointment, the black sheep who never quite measured up. This year, the contrast felt particularly sharp. Mom, ever the master of passive-aggressive digs, seized the opportunity to highlight my shortcomings with a saccharine smile. "Oh, Lucy, darling," she cooed, her voice dripping with false concern as she refilled my wine glass. "Sarah just bought the most adorable little house. When do you think you'll finally settle down and give us some grandchildren?" The question hung in the air, thick with judgment, as all eyes turned to me. I forced a smile, the muscles in my face aching with the effort. "Maybe someday, Mom," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "Right now, I'm just focused on my career." It was a lie, of course. I longed for a home, a family of my own. But after a string of failed relationships and a career that seemed to be perpetually stuck in neutral, I felt like I was drowning, barely able to keep my head above water. The rest of the evening unfolded like a slow-motion train wreck. Each interaction felt like a carefully placed jab, designed to chip away at my already fragile self-esteem. Uncle Mark cornered me by the fireplace, droning on about the importance of finding a good man and settling down before it's too late. My Aunt Carol chimed in, reminiscing about my wild phase in college, complete with exaggerated eye rolls and knowing glances. Even my usually supportive father seemed distant, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and disappointment. As the night wore on, the weight of their expectations became unbearable. I excused myself, retreating to the relative solitude of the guest bedroom, where I sat on the edge of the bed, tears stinging my eyes. I felt like an alien in my own family, an outcast who didn't belong. The truth was, my sister's perfect life was built on a foundation of lies. Sarah's new house, bankrolled by a secret inheritance from Grandma, an inheritance I didn't know existed. Her stable relationship, a carefully constructed facade hiding a string of infidelities that would make your head spin. And my brother Tom, the dutiful son, he was drowning in debt, gambling away his savings, and putting his family's future in jeopardy. They all wore masks, hiding their true selves behind a veneer of success and happiness. And my mother, the ringleader of this charade, reveled in the illusion, using it to bolster her own fragile ego. The person I trusted most was one of them. My own father, the man who had always been my protector, my confidant, was complicit in their game. I overheard him talking to Mom in the kitchen later that night, their voices hushed but audible through the thin walls. "She's just so lost, Martha," he said, his voice laced with pity. "I don't know what we're going to do with her." Mom's response was cold and dismissive. "She needs to get her act together," she snapped. "Sarah is setting such a wonderful example. Lucy needs to learn from her sister." That was the moment something inside me snapped. The pain, the frustration, the years of feeling inadequate, it all coalesced into a burning desire for revenge. They wanted to break me. They wanted to make me feel small. They had no idea what they had unleashed. The game had just begun. The days that followed were a blur of forced smiles and strained conversations. I became a master of deflection, dodging probing questions about my personal life with practiced ease. But beneath the surface, the anger simmered, slowly transforming into a cold, calculating resolve. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Night after night, I lay awake, replaying the events of Christmas in my mind, each insult magnified, each betrayal sharpened. The faces of my family, once a source of comfort and love, now filled me with a burning sense of resentment. I tried to talk to my father to salvage what was left of our relationship, but every attempt was met with platitudes and empty promises. He would listen patiently, nodding his head and offering words of encouragement, but his eyes remained distant, his heart seemingly closed off to my pain. It was as if he had chosen his side, and I was no longer on it. The weight of their deception pressed down on me, crushing my spirit and eroding my sense of self-worth. I felt like I was trapped in a suffocating box, with no escape in sight. The walls were closing in, and I was running out of air. I threw myself into my work, hoping to find some solace in the familiar routine. But even there, I was haunted by the specter of my family's judgment. My colleagues, sensing my distress, offered their well-meaning advice, but their words felt hollow and meaningless. "Just focus on yourself, Lucy," they would say. "Don't let them get to you." But it was no use. Their words were like band-aids on a gaping wound, unable to heal the deep-seated pain that gnawed at my insides. I started making mistakes, my performance slipping. My boss, a pragmatic and results-oriented woman, noticed the change immediately. She called me into her office, her expression a mixture of concern and disappointment. "Lucy," she said, her voice firm but gentle, "you're not yourself. I'm worried about you." I tried to explain, to tell her about the turmoil that was consuming me, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't bring myself to expose my vulnerability, to reveal the cracks in my carefully constructed facade. "I'm fine," I mumbled, my voice barely audible, "just a little stressed." She looked at me skeptically but didn't press further. "Well," she said, "I need you to get back on track. We're counting on you." The pressure mounted, adding another layer of stress to my already overburdened psyche. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, one wrong step away from falling into the abyss. Desperate for an outlet, I started keeping a journal, pouring out my thoughts and feelings onto the page. It was a cathartic release, a way to vent my anger and frustration without inflicting it on others. I wrote about the injustices I had suffered, the lies that had been told, and the pain that had been inflicted. I wrote about my dreams, my hopes, and my fears. And as I wrote, a plan began to take shape in my mind. A plan to expose their secrets, to reveal their true selves to the world. It was a risky plan, fraught with danger, but the thought of finally getting my revenge filled me with a sense of purpose and determination. I knew that I couldn't let them get away with what they had done. I had to fight back, to reclaim my life and my dignity. The idea of exposing my family was terrifying, but the thought of continuing to live under their shadow was even more unbearable. It was a gamble, but I was willing to take the risk. The stakes were high, but the potential reward was even greater. Freedom, justice, and the sweet taste of revenge. The journals became my confidant, the silent witness to my growing rage and intricate plans. Each entry was a step further down the path, each word a brick in the wall I was building against them. They thought they had broken me, but they had only ignited a fire. And that fire was about to consume them all. I started meticulously documenting everything, recording conversations, collecting evidence, building a case against them. They were careless, arrogant, convinced of their own superiority. They never suspected that I was watching, listening, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The abyss yawned before me, a dark, bottomless pit threatening to swallow me whole. I lost my job. The mistakes I'd made, fueled by stress and sleepless nights, finally caught up to me. My boss, though sympathetic, had no choice. "Lucy, I'm so sorry," she said, handing me the severance papers. "But I can't keep someone on who isn't performing." I numbly accepted the documents, the words blurring before my eyes. It felt like another carefully aimed blow from my family, even though they had nothing to do with it. Their negativity had seeped into every aspect of my life, poisoning everything it touched. I walked out of the office building in a daze, the city lights mocking my despair. The weight of my failures crashed down on me, suffocating me with shame and regret. I had lost everything, my family, my job, my sense of self-worth. I was alone, adrift in a sea of disappointment. I considered just disappearing, going somewhere far away where no one knew my name, where I could escape the suffocating weight of my past. The thought flickered in my mind, a tempting escape from the pain, a way to silence the voices that constantly reminded me of my shortcomings. But then something stopped me. A flicker of defiance, a spark of anger that refused to be extinguished. They wanted me to give up. They wanted me to crawl away and disappear. I would show them. I would not let them break me. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of my life. Empty takeout containers littered the coffee table, remnants of meals I barely remembered eating. Clothes were strewn across the floor, a testament to my growing apathy. The phone rang, but I ignored it. It was probably my mother wanting to gloat over my latest misfortune. Let her wonder. Let them all wonder. I was done playing their game. I picked up a bottle of wine, the cheap stuff I usually avoided, and took a long swig. Liquid burned as it went down, but it numbed the pain, if only for a little while. I looked in the mirror at the reflection of a broken woman staring back at me. Her eyes were hollow, her face pale and gaunt. She was a ghost of her former self, a shell of the person I used to be. I hated her. I hated what they had done to her. But beneath the surface of despair, I saw something else. A flicker of steel, a glint of determination that refused to be extinguished. That woman was not defeated. She was merely wounded, and she was about to become very, very dangerous. The glass slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor. Crimson blossomed on the carpet, a stark reminder of the pain that coursed through my veins. But this time, the sight of it didn't break me. It fueled me. It reminded me of what they had done, of what they had taken from me, and it solidified my resolve. They would pay, they would all pay. The next morning, I woke up with a throbbing headache and a mouth that tasted like ash. The events of the previous night swam back into focus, the shame and regret washing over me like a tidal wave. But this time, I didn't succumb to the despair. I got out of bed, showered, and dressed. I threw away the empty wine bottle and cleaned up the broken glass, meticulously scrubbing the crimson stains from the carpet. It was a symbolic act, a way of cleansing myself of the negativity that had consumed me. I made a pot of coffee, strong and black, and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop and started to work. Not on job applications, not on updating my resume. I opened the files I'd been compiling, the documents, recordings, and notes that detailed my family's lies and betrayals. I reviewed everything, meticulously organizing the information, connecting the dots, and building my case. The anger simmered within me, a cold, calculating force that fueled my determination. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. It was about exposing their hypocrisy, about tearing down the facade they had so carefully constructed. They had hurt me, betrayed me, and tried to break me, but they had underestimated my strength. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. And they were about to learn the true meaning of regret. I smiled, a cold, mirthless expression that didn't reach my eyes. The game had changed. And this time I was playing to win. My biggest weapon. The fact that they thought I was harmless. They believed I was too weak, too broken to fight back. They saw me as a victim, not as a threat, and that was their greatest mistake. I smiled, I played their game. I acted the part of the contrite, struggling daughter. I even started attending those excruciating Sunday dinners again, enduring Mom's condescending lectures and Sarah's smug pronouncements. But beneath the surface, a different Lucy was taking shape. A Lucy armed with knowledge, fueled by rage, and driven by a singular purpose: to expose their lies and bring their carefully constructed world crashing down around them. I began subtly gathering more evidence. Sarah's perfect marriage, a sham. I hired a private investigator, using the last of my savings, to discreetly document her frequent rendezvous with various men around town. The investigator was discreet, ex-military, and understood the need for absolute secrecy. He provided me with photographic evidence, time-stamped and irrefutable, of Sarah's infidelity. Each picture was another nail in the coffin of her perfect image. Tom's gambling addiction. I already had a good idea of his bookie's identity from some careless comments Tom had made while drunk one Thanksgiving. A few carefully worded questions to some of his friends, and I had the man's name and address. I started documenting Tom's trips to shady establishments and his increasingly desperate attempts to borrow money from anyone he could. I even managed to record a phone conversation where he was begging his bookie for more time, promising to pay him back double. The most difficult part was dealing with my parents. They were always watching me, scrutinizing my every move, trying to decipher my intentions. I had to be careful not to arouse their suspicion. I started volunteering to help Mom with errands, to spend more time with her, to feign a renewed interest in her life. I even complimented Sarah on her house, telling her how happy I was for her. It was all an act, of course, but it seemed to work. They started to relax, to believe that I was finally coming around, that I was finally accepting my place in the family hierarchy. Little did they know, I was simply gathering information, listening for any slip-ups, any inconsistencies in their stories. I learned that Grandma's inheritance wasn't just a simple gift, it was carefully hidden from me due to some ancient family feud, and I learned that my father knew about it all along. This was a dagger to the heart, but it gave me ammunition. I installed a hidden camera in the living room of their house, disguised as a smoke detector. It was a high-tech piece of equipment, capable of recording high-definition video and audio, and it was virtually undetectable. I used my IT skills from college to secure the feed so it could not be traced back to me. I needed concrete evidence of their complicity, of their deliberate attempts to deceive and manipulate me. The camera was my silent witness, recording their every word, their every action. There were close calls, moments when I thought I was going to be exposed. One day, Mom came into my old room, which I was using as my office, while I was reviewing the investigator's photos of Sarah. I quickly minimized the window, pretending to be working on a spreadsheet. "What are you doing, Lucy?" she asked, her voice suspicious. "Just working on some freelance projects," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to get back on my feet. She eyed me skeptically but didn't press further. "Well, don't work too hard," she said. "You don't want to stress yourself out." As soon as she left, I shut down the laptop and took a deep breath. That was too close. I needed to be more careful. Another time, Tom almost caught me recording his phone conversation with his bookie. I was parked outside his house, in my car, with the recording equipment running. He came outside unexpectedly to grab something from his trunk, and I barely had time to hide the microphone. He glanced at my car, his eyes narrowed, but he didn't recognize me. I quickly drove away, my hands shaking. The anticipation was unbearable. I knew I was close to having everything I needed. The evidence was mounting, the pieces were falling into place. I could almost taste the sweet flavor of justice, the satisfaction of watching their world crumble. I set a date. Christmas. The perfect time to expose them, in front of everyone, when they were all gathered together, basking in their false sense of security. It would be a Christmas they would never forget. Before I could fully unleash my plan, I needed to ensure I was protected legally. Exposing their secrets could have repercussions, and I wanted to be prepared for anything they might try to throw at me. I consulted with a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies. I presented her with the evidence I had gathered, the photos, recordings, and documents, and explained my plan to expose my family's lies. She listened intently, her expression unwavering. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and took a deep breath. "This is a complex situation, Lucy," she said. "There are potential legal ramifications for everyone involved. However, if your evidence is solid and you can prove your claims, you have a strong case." She advised me on the best way to present the information, to maximize its impact while minimizing my own legal exposure. She helped me draft a statement, outlining my grievances and detailing the evidence I had gathered. She also warned me about potential defamation lawsuits and advised me on how to protect myself. "Be prepared for them to fight back, Lucy," she said. "They won't go down without a fight, but if you stick to the truth and present your evidence clearly, you will prevail." Ms. Davies was a valuable ally, a source of strength and guidance in my quest for justice. With her help, I felt confident that I could take on my family and win. The countdown had begun. Christmas was coming. And so was their reckoning. The final piece of the puzzle landed in my lap completely by accident. I was helping my mother organize some old family photo albums, feigning interest in her endless stories about people I barely knew. We were in the attic, surrounded by dusty boxes and forgotten memories. I was about to feign a headache and escape when I stumbled upon a small, locked wooden box tucked away in the back of a trunk. "What's this?" I asked, trying to sound casual. My mother stiffened, her face paling slightly. "Oh, that's nothing, dear," she said quickly, reaching for the box. "Just some old trinkets, nothing important." But her reaction had betrayed her. I knew instinctively that this box held something significant, something they didn't want me to see. I persisted, feigning curiosity. "Come on, Mom," I said. "What's the big secret? Is it pirate treasure?" She laughed nervously, but her eyes remained guarded. "Really, Lucy, it's nothing interesting. Just some old letters and things. I haven't even opened it in years." I knew she was lying. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she was clutching the box to her chest. That night, while everyone was asleep, I snuck back into the attic. Armed with a set of lockpicks I'd ordered online, another skill I'd acquired during my transformation, I carefully worked on the lock. It was old and rusty, and after a few tense minutes, I heard a satisfying click. The box was open. Inside, nestled among yellowed letters and faded photographs, was a document. A legal document. It was a copy of my grandmother's will. But this wasn't the will that had been read to me after her passing. This will was different. This will left everything, not just a small inheritance, but everything to me. There was a codicil attached, explaining that the inheritance was to be held in trust until I turned 30, with my parents as trustees. But the will clearly stated that the money was mine. All of it, the truth hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't just hidden the money from me, they had actively defrauded me, stealing my inheritance and using it for their own gain. Years of resentment and suspicion crystallized into a burning rage. They had lied, cheated, and stolen from me, all while pretending to be loving parents. The hypocrisy was staggering. The discovery of the will was the tipping point. It confirmed my worst fears and solidified my resolve. The carefully constructed facade of my family was about to crumble. I copied the will and the codicil, taking photos with my phone and making sure I had multiple backups. This was my trump card, the evidence that would expose their greed and deceit to the world. The plan was set in motion. Christmas Eve. Everyone would be there. The extended family, friends, business associates, all gathered together in my parents' meticulously decorated living room, celebrating the holidays and basking in their self-proclaimed perfection. That's when I would unleash the truth. I arranged for a projector and screen to be set up in the living room, ostensibly for a slideshow of old family photos. But instead of heartwarming memories, I would present my evidence, my case against them. The photos of Sarah's infidelity, the recordings of Tom's gambling debts, the copy of the real will, and the hidden camera footage of their scheming and lies. It would be a Christmas massacre, a complete and utter destruction of their carefully crafted image. I even wrote a speech, carefully outlining their transgressions and detailing the evidence I had gathered. It was a scathing indictment of their character, a public shamming that would leave them exposed and humiliated. I rehearsed the speech in front of the mirror, hunting my delivery, ensuring that every word dripped with righteous anger and justified contempt. I imagined their faces as I revealed their secrets, the shock, the disbelief, the dawning realization that their world was about to be shattered. The days leading up to Christmas were a blur of frantic activity. I finalized the preparations, double-checking every detail, ensuring that nothing could go wrong. I coordinated with Ms. Davies, my lawyer, to ensure that I was legally protected and that the evidence was presented in the most effective way possible. I even hired a security team to be on standby, in case things got out of hand. I knew my family was capable of anything, and I wanted to be prepared for any eventuality. I continued to play the part of the contrite daughter, attending family gatherings, exchanging gifts, and feigning holiday cheer. It was exhausting, but I knew it was necessary to maintain their trust and lull them into a false sense of security. They had no idea what was coming. They were completely oblivious to the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. On Christmas Eve, I arrived at my parents' house early, ostensibly to help with the final preparations. In reality, I was there to plant the final seeds of destruction. I made sure the projector was properly set up, the screen was in place, and the audio system was working perfectly. I loaded my presentation onto a USB drive and tested it to ensure that everything ran smoothly. I even discreetly disabled the security cameras in the house, ensuring that my actions would not be recorded. As the guests began to arrive, I greeted them with a smile, playing the part of the gracious hostess. I mingled with the crowd, making small talk and observing my family. My mother, beaming with pride, flitted around the room, making sure everyone had a drink and a canapé. Sarah, looking radiant in a designer dress, chatted animatedly with her friends, oblivious to the fact that her perfect marriage was about to be exposed as a lie. Tom, looking nervous and fidgety, hovered near the bar, knocking back one drink after another. And my father, the patriarch of the family, surveyed the scene with a smug sense of satisfaction, convinced that he was in control of everything. They were all so confident, so secure in their carefully constructed world. They had no idea that their reckoning was just moments away. As the clock struck 8, I gathered everyone in the living room. "I have a little surprise for everyone," I announced, my voice trembling slightly. "I've put together a slideshow of old family photos. I thought it would be a fun way to reminisce and celebrate the holidays." My mother beamed. "Oh, Lucy, that's so thoughtful of you," she said. "I'm sure everyone will enjoy that." I smiled, a cold, mirthless expression that didn't reach my eyes. "Oh, I think they will," I said. "I think they'll enjoy it very much." I dimmed the lights, took a deep breath, and plugged in the USB drive. The projector flickered to life, casting a bright light on the screen. But instead of heartwarming family photos, the first image that appeared was a photograph of Sarah, kissing a man who was definitely not her husband. The gasp was audible. The game had begun. The room went silent, save for my mother's strangled gasp. On the screen, Sarah's secret was plastered for all to see. The next image was a close-up of Tom, face flushed, arguing with a burly man outside a seedy-looking establishment. Then another, showing him handing over a wad of cash. The whispers started, growing louder with each passing photo. My father's face, previously radiating smugness, was now a mask of disbelief and fury. He lunged for the projector, but the security team I'd hired subtly stepped in, blocking his path. I advanced the slideshow, each image, each recording, a calculated blow. Tom's desperate pleas to his bookie filled the room, his voice cracking with fear as he promised to pay back double, triple, anything to avoid the consequences of his addiction. Sarah's face crumpled as her friends and family saw her infidelity laid bare. But the real bombshell was yet to come. The screen went black for a moment, then lit up with an image of the will. The real will, the one that left everything to me. A collective gasp filled the room as the words became visible. The codicil, detailing the trust and my parents' role as trustees, was highlighted in bright red. I watched as the realization dawned on them, the understanding of their betrayal sinking in. My mother began to sob, burying her face in her hands. My father stood frozen, his eyes wide with shock. I took a step forward, grabbing the microphone I had set up. "For years," I began, my voice trembling but firm, "I have been treated as an outsider in this family. I was constantly made to feel like I wasn't good enough, that I didn't deserve the same opportunities as my sister. But what I didn't know was that it wasn't just about favoritism. It was about greed. It was about my parents stealing my inheritance, using my money to fund their lavish lifestyle, while I struggled to make ends meet." I paused, letting my words sink in. "This will," I said, pointing to the image on the screen, "is proof of their deception. It's proof that they lied, cheated, and stole from me, all while pretending to be loving parents." I advanced the slideshow one last time, revealing the hidden camera footage. There they were, my parents, sitting in their living room, discussing their plans to keep the inheritance from me, to manipulate me into accepting their version of reality. The audio was clear, their voices filled with callous disregard for my feelings. The room was silent, everyone staring at the screen in horrified fascination. My mother let out a wail, collapsing into a chair. My father's face was a twisted mess of rage and humiliation. Sarah stood frozen, her perfect facade shattered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Tom was pale and shaking, his gambling debts and betrayals exposed for all to see. I looked at them, my family, the people who had caused me so much pain, and I felt nothing, just a cold, empty satisfaction. The police arrived shortly after, alerted by one of the guests. My parents, Tom, and Sarah were taken into custody, facing charges of fraud, embezzlement, and potentially other crimes depending on how deep the investigation went. The family gathering dissolved into chaos, guests fleeing the house in stunned silence. In the days that followed, their lives unraveled. Sarah's husband filed for divorce, taking their children with him. Tom's gambling debts were called in, and he lost everything. My parents faced public shamming and legal battles that would likely consume them for years to come. Their reputation, their wealth, their carefully constructed world all gone. As for me, I finally had justice. I had my inheritance back, and I was free from their control. I sold my parents' house and used the money to start a new life, far away from their toxicity. I surrounded myself with people who loved and supported me, and I finally began to heal. People ask me if I regret what I did, if I feel guilty for destroying my family. And my answer is always the same: no. They made their choices, and they had to face the consequences. I simply exposed the truth. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's about reclaiming your power, about standing up for yourself, and about refusing to be a victim. It's about setting boundaries and making sure no one ever tries to cross them again. It was about survival. It was about finally breathing. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more stories of justice.